The single dad woke up before the sun rose, as he always did. The alarm on his phone buzzed softly at 5 in the morning, and even before he opened his eyes fully, he was already thinking about the day ahead. His apartment was small, with the faint smell of coffee lingering from last night. He shuffled to the kitchen in his slippers, still half asleep, and put the kettle on. The water hissed as it boiled, filling the quiet room with a sense of warmth. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and took a slow sip, feeling the heat travel down his chest and wake him up. The city outside was still dark, but he could hear the faint hum of traffic beginning to stir, the distant wail of a siren. In the chirping of birds that started their morning songs earlier than most people noticed, he lived a quiet life. There wasn't much excitement, no glamorous events or sudden surprises. Every day felt like the one before, and yet he found a strange kind of comfort in it. He worked as a janitor at the local community center. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills, and it kept him busy. Cleaning floors, sweeping dust, emptying trash cans, and making sure everything was in order. These were the small, unnoticed tasks that kept life moving smoothly for everyone else, though few ever appreciated the effort it took. But he didn't mind. He never needed applause. He liked seeing the community center clean, neat, and welcoming for everyone. After finishing his coffee, he dressed in his work clothes, simple trousers, a plain shirt, and well-worn shoes. He grabbed his cleaning supplies and headed out the door. The streets were still quiet, and the cold morning air nipped at his cheeks. He walked briskly, not because he was in a rush, but because he liked to feel the morning energy. The way the city slowly came alive with each passing moment. The few people he passed nodded politely, and he nodded back. A small ritual that made the world feel connected in tiny, comforting ways at the community center. He unlocked the doors and let the first few visitors in. Some came for the gym, some for classes, and a few to meet friends. He smiled quietly at them, exchanging friendly words, though most were more focused on their own routines than on noticing him. It didn't matter. He was used to blending into the background. That had been his life for a long time, steady, quiet, and mostly invisible. He made his rounds, mopping floors, wiping down tables, and arranging chairs neatly. The smell of cleaning supplies filled the air, a scent that oddly made him feel accomplished. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it mattered. As he moved through the halls, he noticed a small girl lingering near the gym entrance. She was maybe 7 or 8 years old, with hair tied into a messy ponytail and a look of hesitation in her eyes. She clutched a small bag close to her chest and peeked nervously around before stepping forward. He had seen her before. It's always quiet, never joining any of the classes or activities. She came with her mother sometimes, but she never stayed long. Today, though, something was different. She looked like she wanted to do something but was afraid to try. He watched her for a moment, pretending to be busy with the mop, but his eyes followed her every move. Finally, she approached him, her small voice barely audible. "Excuse me, sir?" He turned and smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart. How can I help you?" "I wanted to dance," she said, glancing down at her shoes. "But I don't think I can." He crouched down to her level, keeping his tone soft and encouraging. Dancing is all about having fun and trying. You don't have to be perfect. Even the best dancers started exactly where you are right now. She looked up at him with wide eyes, hope and fear mixing in her gaze. "Really?" "Really," he said, nodding. "I'll be right here and I'll cheer you on." A small smile appeared on her face, and she hesitated only a moment longer before stepping onto the dance floor. He stood to the side, quietly sweeping, giving her space but watching closely. The music wasn't playing yet. She just moved her feet a little, testing the floor, feeling the rhythm in her small, careful steps. She tripped once, stumbled, then laughed quietly at herself. The sound was light and musical, and he felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He remembered a time when he had dreams too, dreams he had put aside because life demanded practicality. He had wanted to play the piano, to travel, to do something meaningful in the world. But life had been harsh, responsibilities heavy. Now, watching this little girl finding her courage, he felt a part of those old dreams stirring again, as if through her. A small spark of hope had returned. The day went on, and he continued his work, but he kept glancing at her. She practiced in short bursts, sometimes alone, sometimes with a few other kids watching from a distance. He never interrupted, never pushed, only offered smiles, nods, and gentle words of encouragement when needed. Slowly, she began to relax, moving more confidently, letting the music guide her instead of fear. Lunch came and went, and the community center filled with the hum of people chatting, laughing, and living their lives. He continued cleaning, but he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Tomorrow, she would come back. She would try again. And maybe the next day, she would dance in front of more people, gaining confidence, growing stronger in ways he could almost see, but not fully understand yet. As evening approached, he locked up the community center, turned off the lights, and walked home under a sky streaked with the pink and orange of sunset. He thought about the little girl, about her bravery, and about how life sometimes surprised you with moments that changed everything. His life had been quiet, steady, predictable, but maybe that was about to change in a way he didn't expect. At home, he made a simple dinner, ate slowly, and reflected on the day. He thought about the dance, about small acts of courage, and about how even the quietest life could intersect with something beautiful. He washed the dishes, put on a small pot of tea, and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle. For the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet excitement, a gentle hope that something extraordinary was quietly unfolding. He didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring. Perhaps it would be another ordinary day, filled with mopping floors and sweeping dust. But maybe, just maybe, the little girl's dance would open a door to something unexpected. And even if nothing changed outwardly, something had already shifted inside him. A small, tender hope had begun to grow. Fragile but real, and he held on to it as he sipped his tea. Watching the night settle softly over the city, sleep came slowly. And he drifted off with the thought of tomorrow, of courage, of small miracles hidden in ordinary moments. And though he didn't yet realize it, the first dance of a little girl would soon change everything, for her and for him, in ways neither could imagine. The quiet, steady life of the single dad was about to meet a small spark that would light up more than just the community. Center it would touch hearts, reshape lives, and remind both of them that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin quietly, in the most ordinary places. The next morning, the single dad woke up with the usual routine, but there was a subtle excitement in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. The city was still quiet as he walked to the community center, early sunlight spilling over the buildings and casting long shadows on the pavement. He carried his mop and bucket, the familiar weight comforting, grounding him in his everyday life. Yet today he felt a sense that something was different. There was a small energy humming in the air, almost invisible, but enough to make the day feel special as he entered the community center. He noticed the little girl already waiting near the dance area. She clutched her small bag tightly, her fingers twisting the straps nervously. She had arrived earlier than usual, and there was a nervous determination in her eyes. The single dad gave her a warm nod, smiling gently. He didn't rush her, didn't ask her to perform or explain herself. He simply started his cleaning routine, moving around the hall, occasionally glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She took a deep breath and opened her bag. Inside were a pair of worn-out dance shoes and a small folded ribbon. She hesitated for a moment, then put on her shoes, tying the ribbon carefully in her hair. She looked up at him again, her small voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think I can really do it?" He nodded, crouching slightly so he could speak at her level. "You can. Just take one step at a time. Don't worry about anyone else, only about how it feels inside you." She gave a small nod, almost shyly, and then took her first tentative steps onto the floor. At first, her movements were hesitant. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to match the rhythm she felt in her head. She stumbled a few times, catching herself on the edge of the wall. Each misstep made her cheeks flush red, but she kept going. The single dad swept nearby, keeping his eyes on her, and whenever she glanced at him, he offered a smile and a soft nod. He never gave instructions, only encouragement. He had learned long ago that sometimes the most important thing a child needed was not correction, but belief that they could succeed. Time passed, and she began to loosen up. Small movements grew into larger, more confident steps. Her arms stretched out as she twirled slightly, her eyes closing for a brief moment as if she was imagining herself somewhere far away. Somewhere where the music came from her heart instead of a speaker. The janitor watched quietly, his heart warming with every small improvement. He had seen children before, of course, but there was something different about her determination. Something that touched him deeply, making him remember the dreams he once had but had set aside long ago. After a while, she paused, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I'm not very good," she admitted, almost apologetically. "I keep messing up." He knelt beside her, looking at her earnestly. "No one starts perfect. Even the people you see dancing on stage practiced for years before they could do it. What matters is that you are trying, that you are brave enough to keep moving, even when it feels hard. That is the real magic of dancing." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. His words seemed to settle inside her, giving her the courage to try again. She returned to the floor, moving with more purpose this time. The rhythm came more naturally, her steps more confident. A small smile played across her lips, and for a moment, she forgot the audience, forgot the fears, and simply let herself move. The janitor watched, quietly amazed at the transformation happening in front of him. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. Later in the morning, a few other children began to drift in, curious about the little girl practicing dance. They whispered, among themselves, some teasing, some laughing, but she didn't falter. She focused on the music in her mind, the gentle encouragement from the janitor anchoring her. She taught herself to ignore the murmurs and instead listen to the rhythm, the beat that seemed to echo inside her chest. By midday, she was smiling, more freely laughing when she made a mistake, and spinning with a lightness that surprised even her. The janitor continued his work, cleaning the hall, arranging chairs, and mopping the floors. Yet he kept glancing at her, his heart swelling with quiet pride. He realized that this small act, supporting a child who had so little confidence, was more meaningful than any award or recognition he had ever received in his life. For the first time in years, he felt that his existence mattered in a very real way. His quiet, unnoticed work had intersected with something beautiful, the courage and growth of a small, determined soul. During lunch, she sat with him for a brief moment, nibbling on a sandwich she had brought. She looked at him shyly. "Do you think I can dance in front of other people?" she asked. He looked out the window at the bustling city beyond and then back at her, smiling softly. "I think you can, and if you fall or make mistakes, that's okay. Falling doesn't mean you failed. It means you are brave enough to try." Her eyes widened and she nodded with quiet determination. She finished her sandwich quickly and returned to the dance floor, eager to practice more. Sun streamed through the tall windows. She danced with growing confidence, her movements smoother, her laughter more frequent. Occasionally, she glanced at the janitor, whose gentle nods and encouraging smiles were like invisible threads, keeping her courage intact. By evening, her stamina was impressive. She could move to the rhythm more naturally, her steps flowing with grace she hadn't known she possessed. The janitor stood back, observing her, and felt a strange mix of awe and nostalgia. Watching her reminded him of his younger days, of the things he once loved, the dreams he once had, the courage he once needed to move forward. It was a quiet revelation that life could still surprise him, even in its smallest, simplest forms. After closing the center, they walked outside together. The streets were bathed in the soft glow of the sunset. The air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens. The girl skipped ahead a few steps, then ran back to the janitor. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but sincere. "I think I really can do it now." He smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "You already are doing it, and tomorrow you'll do even better." She beamed at him, and for the first time he felt that their quiet partnership had shifted something fundamental in both of their lives. She had found her courage, and he had found a spark of hope he hadn't realized he'd been missing. That night, as he prepared for bed, he thought about the day's events. Replaying the little girl's hesitant steps, her small triumphs, and the laughter that had filled the hall. He realized that supporting her was not just about teaching dance or encouraging practice. It was about belief, believing in someone else enough to give them the confidence to believe in themselves. And in doing so, he had reminded himself of the power of hope, patience, and quiet courage. He lay in bed, the city lights twinkling through his window, and felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. The dance was just beginning, but he already knew it would change everything. Not in the loud, dramatic ways people often imagined, but in the small, profound ways that touched hearts, shaped confidence, and created bonds that would last. The little girl's courage was becoming his inspiration, and the quiet janitor's steadfast presence was giving her the space to grow. Tomorrow promised another day of practice, another day of hesitant steps turning into graceful movements, another day of small victories that would build into something extraordinary. And though he didn't yet know how far this journey would go, he felt certain of one thing: life, in its quietest moments, could create the most beautiful surprises, and sometimes all it took was one person believing in another to set the world in motion. The day of the performance arrived quietly, without fanfare. The single dad woke up earlier than usual, his mind already alert before the alarm rang. Outside, the sky was pale and calm, like it was holding its breath. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up. He didn't know why his chest felt heavy and light at the same time. It was just another day at work, he told himself. Yet deep down, he knew it wasn't. When he reached the community center, the atmosphere felt different. There were colorful papers taped to the walls, chairs arranged in neat rows, and a small stage set up at the front of the main hall. Someone had placed flowers near the entrance, and the smell of fresh polish mixed with excitement in the air. Today was the small community showcase, a simple event where children would sing, draw, read poems, or perform short routines. Nothing fancy, nothing professional. But for one little girl, it meant everything. He started his usual work, checking the floors, wiping chairs, and making sure everything was safe and clean. As he worked, people came in one by one, parents carrying bags, grandparents holding hands with children, neighbors chatting softly. Laughter echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls. He kept his head down, focused on his tasks. But his eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. Then he saw her. She walked in slowly, holding her mother's hand. She wore a simple dress, nothing expensive, but it fit her well. Her hair was neatly tied back, the same small ribbon she had worn while practicing. Her eyes scanned the room, wide and nervous. When she spotted him near the side of the hall, her face lit up just a little. Not a big smile, but enough to show relief. He gave her a gentle nod, the same one he always did. It was their quiet signal. You're not alone. She went to sit with the other children, waiting for their turn. From where he stood, he could see her swinging her feet slowly, her hands clasped tight in her lap. She kept taking deep breaths, just like he had shown her before. Inhale, exhale. Again, the program began. One child sang softly. Another read a poem with shaky hands. The audience clapped kindly after each performance. There were mistakes, missed lines, and nervous giggles, but no one minded. The room felt warm, forgiving. Still, as the performances went on, her nervousness grew. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way she bit her lip. When her turn was announced, she froze. For a brief moment, she didn't move at all. Her mother leaned down and whispered something in her ear. The girl nodded slowly and stood up. Each step toward the stage looked heavier than the last. The room grew quieter as she reached the center of the stage. Music was ready, waiting. From the side of the hall, the janitor paused his work. He leaned against the wall, mop resting beside him, his heart beating faster than he expected. He told himself she would be fine. She had practiced. She was brave. But fear has a way of creeping in, even when you believe. The music started at first. She didn't move. Sound filled the room, and all eyes were on her. A few seconds passed that felt much longer. He saw her chest rise and fall quickly. Then she remembered. One small step forward, another to the side. Her arms lifted slowly, just like she had practiced. Her movements were not perfect. She missed a turn, nearly lost her balance. A few people in the crowd shifted in their seats. But then something changed. She steadied herself. Her feet found the rhythm. Her body began to move with more confidence, as if the fear was slowly loosening its grip. As she danced, the room seemed to fade away for her. She wasn't thinking about the people watching anymore. She was listening to the music, feeling it guide her steps. Her arms moved freely now, her face relaxed. A small smile appeared, then grew wider. She spun gently, her dress swaying with her movements. The janitor felt his throat tighten. He wasn't prepared for how deeply this moment would affect him. Watching her, he didn't just see a child dancing. He saw courage. He saw every small step she had taken over the past days. He saw the quiet moments of doubt, the times she almost gave up. And now, here she was, standing tall in front of everyone. The audience noticed it too. The whispering stopped. Faces softened. Some people leaned forward, fully drawn into her performance. They weren't watching a routine anymore. They were watching a child discover her strength. Near the end, she made a small mistake again. Her foot slipped slightly. This time, she didn't freeze. She laughed softly and kept going. That simple act did something powerful. A few people smiled. Someone in the back nodded approvingly. It didn't matter that she wasn't perfect. She was real. When the music ended, there was a brief silence. Then the clapping began. It started slow, then grew louder. Applause filled the hall, echoing off the walls. She stood there for a second, surprised as if she wasn't sure it was meant for her. Then she bowed awkwardly, her cheeks turning red. She looked out into the crowd, and then, instinctively, her eyes found him. He was clapping too, his hands steady. His eyes shining, she smiled at him, a real smile. Full of pride and disbelief, as she walked off the stage, people congratulated her. A few parents told her she did great. She hugged her mother tightly, her whole body shaking with emotion. The janitor quietly returned to his work, not wanting attention, not wanting to interrupt the moment. But inside, something had shifted. He realized that he had been holding his breath through the entire performance. Now, as he exhaled, he felt lighter, proud. Not in a loud way, but in a deep, steady way that settled into his bones. The event continued, but his mind kept returning to that dance. He cleaned the hall as people slowly left, folding chairs, sweeping floors, restoring order. A few people nodded at him, thanked him for the clean space. One parent even said, "Good job today." He wasn't sure if they meant the cleaning or something else later. As the hall emptied, the girl came up to him. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, twisting the ribbon in her hair. "I did it," she finally said. He smiled. "You did more than that. You were brave." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I was scared. But I remembered what you said." Felt a quiet pride settle in his chest. "I knew you would." As they went their separate ways that evening, the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the world in soft gold. The janitor walked home slower than usual, replaying the moment in his mind. He hadn't expected to feel this way. He hadn't expected a simple dance to touch him so deeply. He didn't know it yet. Odd. But that first dance had changed more than one life. It had planted a seed, not just in the heart of a little girl, but in his own. And that seed was already beginning to grow. The days after the performance felt different. Even though nothing on the surface had really changed, the community center still opened at the same hour. The floors still needed mopping. The chairs still had to be stacked and unstacked. Yet for the single dad, each step he took through the building felt lighter, as if the walls themselves remembered what had happened. The morning after the dance, he arrived early, just like always. The hall was quiet, the stage already taken down, the decorations removed. But he could still picture the moment clearly. The shy steps, the pause, the applause. As he swept the floor where the stage had been, he paused for a moment, leaning on the broom. A small smile crossed his face before he even realized it. People began arriving, and something subtle happened. A few parents smiled at him in a way they hadn't before. One woman stopped and said, "Good morning," and actually waited for his reply. Another man nodded and said, Thanks for everything you do here." These weren't big gestures, but they stood out. He wasn't used to being noticed later that day. The little girl came back. She walked in with a different energy now. Her steps were quicker, her shoulders relaxed. She still held her bag close, but not like before. This time, it felt more like excitement than fear. When she saw him, she waved without hesitation. "I practiced at home," she said, almost breathless. "I showed my mom," he smiled. "And how did that go?" "She cried," the girl said, then laughed softly, but in a good way. They both stood there for a moment, sharing that quiet joy. He didn't ask her to dance. He didn't need to. She already felt free enough to move when she wanted. A little later, music played softly from a speaker. She began to practice again, this time without looking around for approval. Other children noticed. One boy stood near the door, watching her. Then another girl joined him. Soon, 2 more kids gathered, curious but unsure. The little girl kept dancing, unaware at first. When she finally noticed them, she froze for a second. Old habits tried to return. She looked toward the janitor, her eyes searching. He gave her the same calm nod. She took a breath and kept going. That small moment changed everything. One of the girls stepped closer. "Can you show me that spin?" she asked. The little girl hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, she showed the move. The others tried too, laughing when they messed up. The janitor watched from a distance, his chest tight with emotion. He wasn't just watching a child dance anymore. He was watching confidence spread. Over the next few days, the group grew. More children joined in, turning the open space into a place of movement and laughter. There was no official class, no teacher, no pressure. Just kids learning from each other. Parents watched from the sidelines, smiling. Some asked the janitor how long the girl had been dancing. "She had just started," he said simply. They looked surprised. One afternoon, a woman who helped organize events at the center approached him. She had seen him around for years, but had never really spoken to him before. "You've been doing something special here?" she said gently. He shook his head. "I just clean." Sometimes that's not all people do. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and went back to his work. But her words stayed with him. At home, his evenings felt fuller. He still ate alone, still washed his dishes in silence, but his thoughts were different. He replayed the little girl's smile, the way she helped the others, the way the room felt warmer when she danced. He realized something important. He had been living carefully for a long time, staying quiet, staying small. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing that his presence mattered now. That belief was starting to crack. One evening, as he was taking out the trash at the community center, he overheard 2 parents talking. "Did you see how confident she is now?" One said, "Yes," the other replied. "And that janitor? He's always there, watching out for them." He froze, hidden behind the door. He didn't mean to listen, but their words reached him anyway. "They're lucky to have someone like him," one of them said. He swallowed hard. The little girl noticed changes in him too. Even if she couldn't explain them, he laughed more now. He stood a little taller. When she spoke, he listened fully, not distracted by his tasks. One day she asked him a simple question. "Why do you always help people?" He thought for a moment. "Because once, someone helped me when I needed it." She nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. The community center slowly became a place of quiet transformation. People stayed longer. Kids looked forward to coming. The space felt alive in a new way. And though no one said it out loud, many understood that the change hadn't come from a new program or a big investment. It had come from kindness and belief. One afternoon, the little girl sat beside him while he took a short break. "I want to dance again," she said. "You can," he replied. "In front of people," she added. He looked at her carefully. She wasn't scared this time. She was hopeful. "Whenever you're ready," he said. She smiled and leaned back, looking up at the ceiling. "I didn't know I could do hard things before." He felt that sentence settle deep inside him. Neither did I, he thought. As the weeks passed, word spread. More parents asked about dance times. Some offered to bring music. Others volunteered to help. The woman from the events team mentioned the idea of a small regular showcase, something informal. She asked him what he thought. "I think the kids would like it," he said. She smiled. "I thought so too." For the first time, he felt like his opinion mattered. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, he stood alone in the hall. The lights were dim, the floor freshly cleaned. He walked to the center of the room and stopped. The space felt full, even in silence. He imagined the little girl dancing there again. Imagined the other kids laughing. Imagined himself standing off to the side, watching, believing. He realized then that her first dance hadn't just changed her life. It had changed how people saw her. It had changed how people saw him. And most importantly, it had changed how he saw himself. He turned off the lights and locked the doors, stepping outside into the cool evening air. The sky was dark, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt open, like something good was still on its way. Weeks passed since the little girl's first dance, and the rhythm of the community center had changed. The space felt alive in ways it never had before. Children moved around more freely. Parents lingered longer, and even the quiet corners seemed warmer. For the single dad janitor, the change was less about the center itself and more about how he felt walking through it each day. His steps felt lighter, and his heart carried a quiet expectation that good things could happen in ordinary moments. Every morning, he arrived early, opening the doors to welcome the first arrivals. The little girl was usually the first one there, rushing in with energy that made the hall hum. She no longer clutched her bag tightly. Instead, she walked confidently, smiling at him as he arranged chairs and swept the floors. Today, she bounced up to him, holding a small notebook. "Look," she said, showing him sketches she had drawn of dance moves. "I want to make up a new routine." He knelt beside her, smiling. "I can't wait to see it," she began to explain, using her tiny hands to show spins, jumps, and steps. As she spoke, other children began to gather, curious. Soon the hall was filled with movement again, with laughter and chatter. The janitor watched, quietly mopping the floor, letting them take over the space. This was his world too, in a new way, one that involved more than cleaning, more than observing. He was part of something that mattered. Over the next few days, the group of children grew. More kids joined their informal dance sessions. They experimented, fell, laughed, and learned. The little girl took the lead, but she never forced anyone. She remembered how afraid she had been on her first day, and she wanted to make sure nobody else felt that way. The janitor stayed nearby, always present, a silent source of support. He didn't give instructions, but his steady presence reminded them they were safe to try and fail, try again. One afternoon, a parent approached him while he was cleaning. She had seen the change in her child and wanted to know how it had started. He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "She just needed someone to believe she could," he said softly. "The rest, she did herself." The woman smiled, understanding immediately. "Sometimes that's all it takes," she said. It was true. The little girl's courage had inspired others, but the janitor realized he had been inspired too. Seeing her grow, he had begun to remember his own dreams, his own possibilities. He had thought that life would always be quiet, always unnoticed. But here, in the laughter and movement of children, he found a reflection of hope he hadn't felt in years. Then came the day of the informal showcase. The community had heard of the little girl's dance, and they wanted to see her again. This time, it wasn't just children performing. Parents and neighbors came to watch. Chairs were set up, and the room buzzed with anticipation. The janitor cleaned quickly, arranging chairs and making sure the floor was safe. The little girl approached him before the event started. "I'm nervous," she admitted. He smiled, kneeling beside her. "Remember, it's about having fun. The rest will take care of itself." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think I'm ready." As the music began, she stepped onto the small stage at the front of the hall. At first she moved cautiously, but as the rhythm took over, she danced with a grace and joy that captivated everyone. Her movements were not flawless, but they were full of life and confidence. The other children joined her, turning the performance into a spontaneous celebration of courage and friendship. The janitor watched from the side, quietly overwhelmed. He realized that he had never expected to be part of something like this. His quiet life had intersected with hers, and together they had created something more meaningful than he could have imagined. The applause at the end was loud, but it wasn't the clapping that mattered. It was the pride in the little girl's eyes, the smiles on the faces of the children, the way the room felt lighter and warmer. Later, as everyone was leaving, the little girl ran up to him and hugged his leg tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against his pants. "I couldn't have done it without you." He knelt down, holding her gently. "You did all of it yourself. I just helped you see it." She pulled back slightly, her eyes shining. "But you believed in me?" He had. He had believed quietly and steadily in a child he barely knew, and in doing so, had opened the door to change not just in her life, but in his own. The days turned into weeks, and the community center became a place of energy and hope. Children continued to dance, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups. Parents joined in small ways, bringing music, helping with minor tasks, or simply watching and encouraging. The little girl remained at the heart of it all, growing in confidence, kindness, and leadership. And the janitor, who had once faded into the background, now carried a quiet pride that came from knowing he had made a difference in a subtle, meaningful way. One evening, after the children had left, he stood alone in the hall. The lights were dim, the floor clean, the chairs stacked neatly along the walls. He walked to the center of the space and looked around. The room seemed different now. It wasn't just a community center anymore. It was a place of possibility, of courage, of small miracles that grew quietly into something extraordinary. He thought about the little girl's first dance, how hesitant she had been, how unsure she felt. And he thought about her now, dancing confidently, inspiring others. He realized that sometimes life works in small, quiet ways. One small act of courage, one small bit of belief, can change everything. He turned off the lights and stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing against his face. The city stretched before him, quiet and calm. But inside he carried a warmth that would not fade. A little girl's dance had changed more than just her life. It had changed the lives of the children, the parents, the community, and most importantly, his own. He smiled to himself, knowing that sometimes the most powerful changes begin quietly, in ordinary places, with ordinary people, simply believing in one another.